Jesus was called one day to the home of some good friends in Bethany. Martha, her brother, and her sister were very close and personal friends of Jesus. We know most about his friendship with Martha. He was able to discuss theology with her in a dynamic way that he couldn't do with most people. He had enjoyed her hospitality. He had an open, honest relationship with her. And so we assume that he probably had that also with her siblings. It was a friendship so strong that Jesus had been able to speak to Martha of a mistake she was making, and the friendship only seems to have grown stronger. If her brother and sister had been only half as good of friends to Jesus as Martha was, it was still closer than most people ever get to each other. Jesus received the news that Lazarus was deathly ill, and when he arrived at Bethany, Lazarus was dead. There are things about the story that we don't understand, but what we do hear and we can understand in a way is that Jesus wept. Amazingly, we're told that although Jesus would raise Lazarus to live again, we hear that Jesus wept. He must have wept for the pain of Martha and Mary, of what it would mean to him to lose this good friend. He wept for the pain and the love, and for what losing someone means to all people. And as sorrow often does, this death may have reminded Jesus of the pain of other losses, other tears for grandparents, for friends, perhaps when Joseph had died. So he wept because he cared, and caring means that sometimes you will hurt. Wherever people care about each other, something else is inevitable. There will be pain and sorrow. This is not pessimism, it's simply true. Perhaps if people were perfect and never made mistakes and there was no illness and no death, then love would be possible without pain. The world isn't like that. And when we care about people, we are going to hurt with them and we're going to hurt for them. Of course, there are different kinds of pain. One terrible sort of sorrow comes when love fails. How awful it is when a husband and wife stop loving each other, or when they decide that they can't live together without mutual destruction. How painful is it when a parent hurts their child? How awful is it when a child rejects the parents or chooses a lifestyle contrary to the values that the parents hold dear? What pain a parent suffers when a child starts down a path of self-destruction. That's all the pain that Jesus felt when he wept over Jerusalem. How awful when a beloved parent's mind or personality leaves before their body does. How helpless and terrible we feel when a friend or brother or sister makes choices that we know will only hurt them in the long run. A strange, puzzled pain comes with a failure of friendship or when people we trusted let us down. Jesus would have to bear that along with the cross at the end. And who has not wept at the loss of a friend or family member? With all the faith in the world, we still face the loss of a loved one with dread. We may walk through the valley of the shadow hand in hand with God, but loss is still loss. Jesus experienced all that we do in grief. We can only guess at what he felt when Joseph died, or when his family misunderstood him, or when friends and neighbors scoffed at him. We can imagine the depth of his pain when he saw his mother's anguish at the cross, or what he felt at Peter's denial and at Judas's betrayal. Jesus has been described as a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. That's why we have to pay attention when he tells us things like, "Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted." Blessed are they who mourn. One thing sorrow surely tells us is that we have loved, and the only way not to mourn is not to love, and not to love is to shrivel up and die. Many of you may have read the book called Tuesdays with Morrie. Morrie was a man whose death was fast approaching, and one thing he said many times a day was this: love each other or perish. So blessed are they who mourn, for their sorrow is a sign of their love, and their pain tells them they have not perished. The scriptures tell us that love is from God, and that everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. So blessed are they who mourn, for they love and they know God. Now, of course, we've all known people who have let their grief defeat them. I'm sure there are many reasons for that, including the nature of the love they had in the first place. But it is not our business to judge their grief, nor their ability to handle sorrow, but to grieve for them and to offer our own love. Sorrow is a desert wilderness that we have to face when we love someone. And even when the first sharp pain is gone, the loss is always there. There is a well of loss that every new grief will dip into. Jesus said that those who mourn would be comforted. Now, somehow comforted has been misunderstood to mean that grief will, it won't be painful in some way, that the desert wilderness will somehow be less awful, that tears will not come from that gut-wrenching place deep in our souls. Sometimes I think we can imagine that we might get through grief and somehow get back to where we were before, that we can get back to what we think of as normal, and that it won't be such a painful journey. But we can't. Truth is that we won't ever get back to normal, for example. We'll have to find a new normal. And we can't get through sorrow without pain, because God didn't make us that way. And yet God will also not leave us alone in our grief, because God knows our sorrows and shares it with us. Comfort in the biblical sense is about presence, and it's about strength. We do smile again. We do enjoy life again. Life is good. As the author of Ecclesiastes tells us, there is a time to mourn, but there is also a time to dance. God also made life to be that way. There's a fable about joy and sorrow, that they were male and female, and that they loved each other dearly, but they could see no way to be together. After all, one was joy and the other one was sorrow. They parted painfully and only met sometimes by chance. In one of those meetings, they looked at each other, and their love was so deep that they could hardly bear it. Yet they turned and were about to part when they saw someone. It was Jesus who stood looking at them. And Joy cried, "Oh, it is the Lord of sorrow, and yet he welcomes me." Sorrow cried, "Oh, but it is the Lord of joy, and he still welcomes me." Finally, sorrow and joy had found a place where they could be together. May the peace of Christ be with you always. Amen.